This is a 1975 ex-Belgian Army Series 3 2.25 petrol Land Rover. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Today I'd like to share how we prepared our truck for our first PPE desert adventure, what worked and what we'll do differently next time. As you can imagine, taking an older vehicle on a trip of a few thousand kilometers, much of it off-road, requires some special preparation. Because this is our first proper desert trip, we took inspiration from the pros, namely the SAS and their pinkies. Back in the day, they had exactly the same problems. You never have enough space or engine power, and the more space you use, which means weight, the more you'll be digging yourself out of the sand. So we tried to put as much day-to-day cargo on the outside of the vehicle and left anything we didn't absolutely need at home. The Tunisian dunes are generally small and steep. The LRDG rightly called them hammocks, where you basically launch yourself from hardpack patch to hardpack patch over a crest of very soft sand. The little petrol engine was actually well suited for these short sprints, no turbo lag at all. Being slightly underpowered also has an advantage. You'll usually stall before you dig yourself in too deeply, which often lets you simply reverse out. The downside, of course, is fuel consumption. The standard military truck has two under-seat fuel tanks, but years ago I removed one to fit larger batteries for the winch. That left us with 4 jerrycans and a 45-liter tank. Barely enough, given we were using around 20 liters per day. For the next trip, I'll definitely be reinstalling the second fuel tank. You'd be amazed how easily you can dig yourself out of almost anything, either with your hands or with a shovel. If that fails, a kinetic rope and a fellow desert traveler works wonders. We tried our cool looking old school sand channels twice. Both times, no traction at all. Absolute garbage. We only used the winch once, but next time I'll probably try some kind of a sand anchor. The real key to recovery is asking what's the fastest and least tiring option, because you'll be doing it a lot. While the sand channels were useless for recovery, they're great for attaching things to. Most people use a separate cargo bed enclosure, but I wanted to save weight wherever possible, so the sand ladders served a dual purpose. We also fitted generic D-rings wherever we could. You really cannot have enough attachment points when you're tying gear to the outside for easy access. As for straps, we tested 3 different types and found the oldest design worked the best. The ratchet strap on the left is great if you want something never to move again, but the straps cut easily and the mechanism doesn't like salt or sand. The modern buckle in the middle has the same issues and is finicky to use. The good old pattern 37 on the right is harder to get really tight but unbeatable in terms of robustness, and it looks cool. Lastly, there's nothing worse than driving all day, eating sand, and then unloading boxes in the dark just to pitch your tent. So I made a couple of external side bins you can easily access from the outside of the truck to contain all our camping gear. It's a serious truck. What do you mean, comfort? Joking aside, there's one essential desert item: seat covers. Sitting on heat-soaked black vinyl in short is not a real holiday experience. I threw some potato sacks over the seats. They kept them cool and made them far less sweaty. They also have blue racing stripes, so I'm sure they add horsepower. Comms are essential when scouting ahead. I highly recommend an earpiece for the CB because engine noise and wind noise make the speaker totally useless. We also tried a full headset, but then the RTO can't hear what the driver is saying. A second handheld CB is very handy when scouting on foot and keeping in touch with your patrol. The truck is mostly stock with a few exceptions. As a Belgian army vehicle, it originally didn't come with a 4x4 transfer case, but it did have a limited slip rear diff. Only the army could turn an off-road tractor into a sports car. I converted it to 4x4, but of course kept the limited slip differential, which helped quite a bit on the trip. It's still 24 volts, but I partly converted the ignition system to civilian spec because of some military parts that are becoming very hard to find, like spark plugs. The key to keep moving in the desert is maximizing your tire footprint. We run slightly larger tires than the classic 650 by 16 found on the 88s, with as many plies as possible in the sidewall and in the tread because we air down to 0.6 bars in the sand. To compensate for the reduced wheel travel, I fitted 1-ton shackles for a small suspension lift. Lastly, I also added a snorkel, not essential, but useful for keeping dust out of the air filter. So, what didn't work? The hardest part for the Tunisia trip for an old Land Rover wasn't the dunes, it was the 1,000-kilometer autoroute through France. We drove it in one go at about 90 to 100 kilometers an hour, which caused the transfer case to evacuate all its oil through the overdrive. Everybody who has a ferry or a Bearmac overdrive knows this issue. The problem was I only caught it in Marseille on the way to the ferry, and now I have a rebuilt transfer case in my garage at home. Despite the transfer case making a lot of noise during the rest of the trip, we made it all the way through Tunisia and back. At the same time, another issue appeared. We were getting some heavy stuttering under acceleration, and the engine temperature was significantly higher all the time. This got progressively worse, and by the end of the trip, I was struggling to get onto the dunes and had to keep the heater constantly on full blast, which is delightful in desert temperatures. I first suspected a fuel starvation issue because of the fuel filter, and indeed it was full of sand, but that didn't solve the issue. The next logical step was to trip down the carburetor, but I didn't want to risk it without any spares. After the trip, it turned out I'd installed the accelerator pump diaphragm slightly folded over, which caused a vacuum leak, which got worse with heat and just the mileage. As if that wasn't enough, along the trip, the truck became harder and harder to start. Once up in the revs, it ran perfectly fine. So we suspected an ignition issue, something to do with the old military coil or the RF shielded module, but that wasn't the case. The real culprit was I had swapped the bulletproof military distributor for a Chinese Lucas 45D in order to gain some slight power upgrade from the vacuum advance. However, the brass bushes in the distributor were of such poor quality that they wore very quickly with ingress of sand. So in the end, the points were barely opening anymore unless they were flung at high speed. Hopefully, I've now fixed that problem because I added a new 12 volt civilian coil to a 24 to 12 volt converter from a solar panel. And I built up an old distributor with electronic ignition. But I'll just carry some spare points just in case. Lastly, the sand really does get everywhere. Driving through France in heavy rain at night, I switched on the headlamps and watched the magic smoke escape from the dashboard, as it happens with a Land Rover. Sand had destroyed the indicator stock, so after 3 hours without lights, it was either my wife walking home or me improvising a wiring solution. So I'll definitely be adding a protective cover to the stock, as I've seen other PPE members do sometime. Finally, and that's not a big surprise, one of the rear shocks failed. Um, they were already quite old, so it wasn't totally unexpected. And anyway, on a leaf sprung Land Rover, you don't really notice the difference. So, all in all, taking a serious truck on an adventure really does make for a different experience. And even though there were a few small niggles, the truck proved itself remarkably reliable. If you're on the fence about taking your old warhorse on an expedition, just go for it.